Tim's Extra Time. I'm joined by Melly and, of course, Susie McCabe.
How you doing?
I'm good. A wee bit different for us, Melly. We've got a guest in who we've done the Extra Time before. In fact, I think, Susie, you were on one of these, but it was a long time ago.
Aye.
But we've never filmed it before, so that added pressure for us of being on camera.
Aye. If only you were having the side profile. Everybody's now getting full 3 chins.
Well, that's it. You get it straight down the barrel. We've usually got 2 other cameras, but the first time we ever did this, no joke. See, I mean, you're obviously used to seeing yourself in the telly, but I am not used to seeing myself on camera. And the first time we set up the cameras, it was like here, like dead close to my face, like a front-facing iPhone thing. But it was a test. It was on YouTube, and I'm watching it back. I'm like, fucking no, Mr. Toad, can he do that? I'm like, no chance.
No, it's tough, isn't it? And even I struggled for years listening back to myself, and you go, I hate my voice.
Oh,
I hate it, but you kind of need to do it, don't you? You kind of need to do it.
How did you get? Like, I suppose when you were coming up, you wanted to be a comedian. Was there like a pressure that you had to overcome on stage, or did you just step on and go, do you know what? I actually feel quite comfortable doing this.
I did feel like that because I actually went, I think this is the thing that I'm meant to do.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like people go, I love my job. It's the thing that I just love. I just love my work, and it's that thing that I feel comfortable with. Or like you get guys that coach football teams and have done for years and years, and they go, I just love it, and I get so much out of it. And I think that's just how I felt. I went, right.
That's how they felt.
This is what I'm meant to be doing, isn't it? Right, okay. And I mean, I was very rough around the edges and all that, but I remember that feeling, and I remember thinking to myself, all right, this is what you're meant to do with your time.
I'm so jealous. I'm still looking to get that feeling.
It's such a hard thing to do in it, because I think in our society, we put so much pressure on, you need to be academic, you need to go to university. Yeah, if you're good at sport, you need to be the best, you need to be, at elite sport. A friend actually spoke to me last night, and we were talking about different comedians and their new shows and everything coming up, and he'd get a sneak preview. It's like, unbelievable. And I was like, it's that point where you just fold the pad and pen away and just put it in the bin and carry on with your life. And he went, well, Andy Murray couldn't be Roger Federer, but he could be Andy Murray. And I remember just thinking, like, what a great analogy. It was Scott Agnew that said it to me, right, who listens, big Celtic fan. And I was like, that's such a great analogy. And I think it's that. I don't think we kind of do enough of that in our society. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely not. Especially like, when you're trying to say do something different. Do you know what I mean? There must have been, like, when you say, I'm going to be a comedian, there must have been a lot of people going, listen, you fucking behave. You're funny, but you're not that funny. Because like, being funny is like currency in Scottish, Scottish, isn't it? Like, if you're funny, it's really good, and people value being funny, and they try to be funny. But if you go, I think I'm funny enough to be a comedian, there must have been some amount of people going, there'd be a lot of support, obviously, but that wall that you hit where people are just like, come on, you.
So I done it as a dare, right? A drunken dare with my mate. And basically a friend had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She's around about our age at the time. And my mate was like, we should scare ourselves. And we went away and we done a gig. Basically, we've done a course and we done a gig. And I remember saying to my now ex-wife, right, this is probably why it should probably have been a red flag. We were talking.
We all ignore those from time to time.
Aye, and I'm in the kitchen with my mate the next morning. He'd stayed over and he's like, do you remember what you agreed to last night? I went, I do. And she went, what's this? And I went, me and Paul are going to go and try stand-up comedy. And I swear to God, she turned around straight face and went, do you think you'll make people laugh? Right?
See?
And I was like, see if you're with me for my face. You have completely sold yourself short there, love, right? And then I remember going on stage and doing it and just being like, this is the greatest feeling in the world. And I honestly, it genuinely is for me. It's the greatest feeling in the world.
How did that comedy course work? Like, how did they just teach you how to be funny?
No, they don't. So we pitched up, and it was a woman called Viv G, who I'm really good mates with, and Viv took the course and she went around the classroom. And it's all these people, yeah, like I'm always the comedian. Oh yeah, I'm like so dark. I'm like Frankie Boyle. I'm so controversial, and you're like, just saying paedophile doesn't make you controversial. Right? Yeah. So I went into this comedy course and sat down, went round the room, and everybody was like, "Oh, I've always wanted to be a comedian, and I do amateur dramatics. Came all the way around to me, and my mate was asked the question about, I've wanted to do this course for 5 years. Because basically what happens is you go to the course and they show you how to kind of write and how to look at papers and how to kind of pick stuff out and how you would go and do it. And there's people who think they're really, really funny, and then they just can't do it.
Because there's been funny and there's been a comedian.
Yeah.
They're two
Delivery.
distinctly different things. And they're writing a joke, the lead up to the joke, the way the jokes are structured, how to date in front of an audience for 20 minutes, 45. All that.
Aye, and it's the structure and it's the order of the words and it's your own stagecraft as well. Like, so much goes into, like, for me, because I'm kind of long form and I tell you stories with jokes through it, I've got to have jokes through it, but I can't just stand there and say that for 5 to 7 minutes. I need to be quite physical. And I've got quite a funny face, and that kind of comes with that. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you can see people and you go, that's a really good joke, mate, but your delivery never done it justice. You know what I mean? And you go, or you can see someone who's written a joke, who's performed it 1,000,000 times, and they just throw the joke away because they're like, blah, 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 done. And you're like, that should have got more. And the reason it didn't get more is because of the way you delivered it.
What do you think? Like, obviously, there's this sort of, there's no many female comedians on the scene. And, you know, there's this ridiculous notion sometimes that women can't be funny, which is mental to me because I don't know what it is about the biology of a woman that means she can't tell a joke as much of a man, or what there's lacking there. But when you were coming up, was there like female comedians you admired over male ones? I'm thinking about maybe Janie Godley or anything like that.
Aye, like Janie was so good to me. Like, so good to me. And I know there's obviously a lot of stuff going on with Janie just now personally. And we all know what happened on the Twitter and everything that happened there. But when I was coming through, I done a gig with Janie, maybe around at the Hug and Pint in Great Western Road. And I was on doing 10 minutes, and Janie was up the back of the room and she watched me. And she was like, that was great. It was amazing. Then I was going through to Edinburgh. I was going through to watch a show at Edinburgh Stand, and she was on the show. Joe Caulfield was on the show as well. Joe's a great comedian, like such a good joke writer, And I was like, I'm going to go to that show. And I messaged Janie and I said, I'm going to come through Edinburgh Stand tonight and watch you. Do you want me to run you through? And I knew that an hour in that car with Janie going there and coming back would have been more valuable than like an hour on a stage. Do you know what I mean? And just listening to her and watching her. And she sent an email to Tommy Shepherd because I said, I can't get into the stand. I've been doing this 18 months. And she went, I'll sort that. Next day, phone call. Can you do a gig? A couple of weeks' time. Aye. She then phoned Tommy, made him come down and watch me because you wouldn't say naughty, Janie, would you? And then he got the stand to phone me the next day, gave me her after gigs, one of which was that night in Glasgow. And I just kind of put me on it. And Janie was always a kind of arm round the shoulder, giving you a pointer. But see, just to sit and watch her at any room, you put her in a high-end corporate in a hotel, you put her in a basement, you put her in a miners' welfare, you put her in a fringe venue, put her in a kids' show, anywhere in the world, she'll do the job.
Because a lot of the stuff that people only know about Janie's the stuff on Twitter and all that, but like, you're the first comedian that I've heard just talk about how like a massive comedy presence she was in the Scottish comedy scene. Like, she's huge. It's
tremendous, just tremendous. And just to have this gig at Wild Cabaret on a Thursday, right? And it was a tough gig. It was a beautiful room, tough gig, tough audience, quite a sober audience having their dinner. And Janie would be there in the open spots, and I used to be like, oh, here we go, man, open spot graveyard, right? Because you would just see them come up like, yeah, so I was on Tinder, and the whole room just like, I don't know what Tinder is, son. Look at me. I'm 45 and I'm eating a steak frite. I don't care about your love life. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it was that kind of stuff. So I live at home and I was caught. My mum caught me, masturbating, and you could just see them going, she never. Oh, she never. And that gig was a tough gig, but when you done it and it worked, you felt real satisfaction because you knew you'd done your job, and that was probably the right gig for Janie to run, like an assault course gig. It was beautiful, it was lovely, but it was a tough gig. And I used to see all the open spots would turn up and they'd be like, going, and they'd say to Janie, can I have feedback? And Janie'd be like, listen, I'm not the comedy monitor. I just loved it.
The room's your feedback. Did you get a laugh? No, you were
I'll see you in 6 months. and just great. And do you know what? She's also a really good laugh backstage. She's a good carry on with her. Do you know what I mean?
See the stand, is that like this sort of Barrowlands for a comedian to play at.
I like, see that room, like, I actually, when I started out, played Edinburgh more than Glasgow, which is a bit of a godsend, because sometimes a lot of comics based in Glasgow go, can I do an Edinburgh audience, which is ridiculous, right? But when you do a gig in Edinburgh, it's like doing a gig in London. It's a really international audience, but just by the nature of that city and its demographic. Also, Edinburgh's cool for 3 weeks of the year, and then they're all back in the house. like you think about Glasgow, there's loads of places for gigs, whether it be comedy or music. There's loads going on any night of the week. In Edinburgh, you don't really get that. Do you know what I mean? They don't have a King Tut's.
Aye.
You know what I mean? They don't have, like, what was it, the Vale down across the Queen Street. Do you know what I mean? They don't have that. So yeah, when you get into the stand and you're working your way through that, it's amazing. They're just great clubs by their sheer design. But see that Glasgow stand, I've done solo shows and stuff in it before, and see when that's rammed and the sweat's running down the wall and it's queued right up along the bar, like everybody's against it, and that whole room's just out in front of you. It's everything a comedy club's meant to be.
Because when you're going to the stand, it's always, right, get there early.
Get a seat.
Not get the seats at the back, so you're not at the front. Or then you see the ones that want to go at the front.
Aye.
It's like, please don't be the front, because you don't want to be. So, and you go, oh no.
Aye. It's murder, but and I get it. Like, as an MC, if you're hosting, what we're trying to do is gauge the room so that other acts know exactly who's in the room.
Right.
So in Glasgow, that's quite easy, because you're like, oh, right, what's your name, Martin? Where are you from, Martin? Glasgow. What'd you do, Martin? Right, so that's all right. Go to Edinburgh. What's your name? Where are you from? Spain. Where are you from? Sweden. Where are you? What do you do? I remember one of the first times I ever MC'd the stand. It was Stand Edinburgh, and it was Red Raw, their Monday night. And I says to I went round the whole front row, and everybody was international. And I says to this wee guy, Spanish, I says, are you here on holiday? No, I live here. Right. What do you do? I work for Visit Scotland. And I went, right, so do you like liaise with Spain and Scotland? No. And I was like, because that would be too sensible, wouldn't it? You know what I mean? We've got a Spanish guy working for Visit Scotland. Let's get him to promote this country in Spain. But no, you're doing that to gauge the room. And also, there's a couple other things that we're doing there. We're gauging the room and we're finding out where everyone's from. So if there's any international or whatever. And then we swear, sometimes if we think the room needs it, especially on a Saturday night, you'll drop a C-bomb.
Oh.
Because if you know that the first act that's coming on is going to drop that, I need to take the shock out of the room.
Yeah.
I need to take the hit, shock them, and then when they say it, the first act says it, there's no an issue.
So talking about the room thing, I've got to bring this up because it's something that I see at comedy gigs all the time, and it kind of does my nutting, and I just want to know if it does the comedian's nutting as well. Joiner-inners. That's always, more often than not, it's a guy who thinks he's got a cracking punchline for somebody else's joke or something like that, and I was at a gig, it was Doug Stanhope.
Yep.
Played the O2. He played the O2 a couple of years ago, and it was relentless. The joining in was relentless to the point he had to, because Doug Stanhope, if anybody doesn't know, he sort of rolls with it, punches, plays with it a wee bit, but there was a point he had to more or less just go, listen, enough's enough with this shit, I'm trying to do my job up here. But it's rife, man, the joining in sometimes. As
an MC, right, so if I'm MCing, I will go in, two-footed, stunts up, through the knee, season-ending injury, done, right? Because I'm like, nah. And my perspective is, and I say this to the audience, my perspective is, you've paid money, right? You've paid money to hear really good comedians in the Stand, in the Glee, and Rotunda, all put on good comics that you've paid your hard-earned money for. Now, that's all right for us, but if you're sitting and you've got 2 or 3 kids in the house and it's your one night out because it's your anniversary or a birthday, and you don't really know when the next night out is because money's a wee bit tight, don't ruin it for people. It's their night. It's not my night. I'm at my work. It's your night. And I will always say that to them. I'm like, do you know what, mate? Especially now where I'm like, people have sat in the house for 2 years, pal. You're not going to ruin their night. Because
that happens all the time. The joint, and eventually, and you're just looking at the guy going, nobody's laughing at your jokes here. Everybody just wants you to leave.
Aye. And it's that kind of, there's almost like an attention Like, and the more you kind of deal with it, the more they want it. And you're like, right, okay, but no, I just go straight in, man.
So that's a message to you, right? If you're watching this and you're going to a comedy show and you want to join and you've heard it from the comedian.
Two-footed, man, studs up, like, proper right through the knee, like, I'm talking right
Roy
through.
Keane?
Worse, Cantona.
Right into the crowd with it.
Straight in. And do you know what? Then it's just dealt with. It's dealt with and I've saved your night, and then you're all like that. Do you know what? I feel quite safe with her on the stage because we're going to have a good night out. She seems a good laugh, but she's not putting up with any of that. She's like, nah, see them, they're more important than you, and I'll just get you put out. And then people kind of go, all right, okay.
See, when you were talking about looking for where people are from and all that, when I seen you on Friday as well, you were doing that, sort of gauging the groups, like what you're out for. There was, I think there was a couple out for the anniversary, and then there was birthdays and all that. Do you look for that sort of thing to see a bit of backing?
Aye, because you'll have material as well stored away somewhere, or something's maybe happened at another gig, and you're like, oh, I remember that happened at that gig, so I'm going to talk about that because they've gave me a bit of information. Or, it's an anniversary. Long as you've been together 40 year, mate, and you brought her to a comedy club. Like, how bad is it? Do you know what I mean? And then, but the thing with comedy is it's so universal that you can be sitting there with, like, a first date, a 52 years married couple, a couple that have been together, maybe 10, 15 years, and they just want a night out, a group of boys, a group of girls. It's so universal. Like, if you go to a concert, there is a certain type of person at that concert. That's not how that works in comedy. In comedy, it's just a big broad brush, and you go, right, who have we got in the night? Who have we got in? Let's see it. Do you know what I mean? Because you're not there. You're there to see comedians. You're not there to see a comedian. You go to a band. You go to see a band. Support act's a bonus.
So when you started out in comedy, who was there somebody in comedy or comedians that were huge influences, or people for your family? Like, who gave you this sort of gift of the gab,
I think
comedy?
So my brother's 8 years older than me. My brother's like, man, I'd come in for school and you'd be like 3 and 4, and you'd just be like just full of cheek. You know what I mean? I think I've always had that kind of in me, and it's probably been a defence mechanism. But I would say, like, obviously it's Connolly, right? So, it was the LPs, wasn't it? It was the LPs that we all listened to and watched, and that's obviously your first one. And then having a brother 8 years older than you, obviously his cultural influences then feed in to you, right?
Well, you love the music as well, innit?
Love the music, man. Love it. And so it would be like things like Absolutely, which was in Channel 4, a sitcom, loads of Scottish people, not a sitcom, improv kind of sketch thing. It was brilliant. It was great. The Smell of Reeves and Mortimer.
Aye, I love Reeves and Mortimer so much.
Mulligan, no hair. There is a cheese and it's made of good for me and it's good for you. It's so good, but it's so good, which is totally different to the comedy I do. Do you know what I mean? I remember sitting, I had a broken leg, and he's like, right, I'll leave these videos, right? Videos for me. And it was like the Red and the Blue, Smell of Reeves and Mortimer, and Dennis Leary.
The American?
The American.
Aye.
And it was No Cure for Cancer. I think it was.
Is that when he's smoking in the
just
front?
smoke like the whole time. He smokes through the show, and people go, oh yeah, he's just a Bill Hicks rip-off. And you're like, well, see, when you're 10, you're not really thinking about that. You're just like, this guy's really funny, and he's talking about like how illegal it is to smoke. I think it was in Canada, and at this point you couldn't smoke. Like, so this is like 1990.
That's really dislodged a memory from my childhood, because I've definitely not seen that the past 20 years, but I just picture him now. So he could wear a big long leather jacket or something on. So that's so weird.
And he's like kind of like pockmark faced, and kind of he looks a bit like a villain.
He looks a bit like Viggo Mortensen.
Yes, yes. And he's like, man, where are we going to be smoking next under our duvets, right? And you think he's pretty much bang on the money with that now. So that stuff. Then you've got stuff like Victoria Wood. Now, a lot of people will sneer at that and they go, Victoria Wood, really? See, if you sit and you watch Victoria Wood and you look at what she produced, like Acorn Antiques, Dinner Ladies, look at her solo shows. It might not be your thing. It might not make you laugh, but look at the structure and the work that was put into that. And a lot of people sit and slag Michael McIntyre. Oh, I don't like Michael McIntyre. I love Billy Connolly. So, see if you sit and watch McIntyre, you will see that his joke rate is it's incredible, right? Whether they make you laugh or not, it's incredible. Now, if you think about Connolly, you can watch Connolly for 5 minutes and he's just talking.
Yeah.
There's no punchline because people have got different attention spans at that point in time, and they're in a theatre and people behave differently. You watch McIntyre, he doesn't get that grace. No comedian gets that grace, regardless of who you are. And then you watch McIntyre and you're like, bang, bang, bang. Like, his joke rate is incredible, and he will do a bit. And most comedians will do a bit. If you look at them online, if you go on YouTube, a comic, John Bishop, Jason, Kevin, their bits will be 5 or 6 minutes max. You watch McIntyre, 12 to 13 minutes, and he will, he's got this bit about putting a Christmas tree up in the loft. Right?
I think I might have seen it.
You can't take your Christmas tree out the loft without thinking about that bit, right? And that's when you know it's class, and he will absolutely wring the neck out of that joke. And you're just like, that's 12 minutes on a bit where he's just, and you go, no one writes like that. Do you know what I mean? No one writes like that. Then you've got people like Jason Manford, who's like, got a really nice way about him on stage.
Did you support Jason Manford?
I did.
Yeah,
I supported Jason. I've done it twice. I've done on his previous tour, and then I've done here and Edinburgh, and I'm doing Dunfermline in the next couple of weeks. And you watch that, and it's a very different show. It's a real everyman show, and you sit there, and it's very relaxed, and it's just a very enjoyable night out where you've laughed a lot. So there's different ways in how you deliver. Like, I supported John Bishop as well. And
do you have to alter your act? So do you go, right, I'm doing, not you specifically, but if you know you're supporting a comedian, do you kind of go, right, and anticipate what the room's going to be like? Because these people have all bought tickets specifically to see him, so I need to be aware of that type thing.
Yeah. So like when I supported Stuart Francis in 2 tours around Scotland, and Stuart is like pun after pun after pun, brilliant, unbelievable. So I knew that I had to go out, and I've always got it in my head that I will always walk out to a very, very polite golf club. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Susie McCabe. I've never heard of Susie. Have you heard of Susie McCabe? Not earlier. But you make sure that when you walk off that stage, you're walking off to what he's going to walk on to.
Yeah.
That you absolutely smash that room to bits so that he's got the best room he can possibly play.
So do you think that's harder for your point of view doing that than doing your own gig then?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Because you need to go and win these people over. Nobody's there for you.
You're just a bonus.
Aye. Whereas if somebody's come to see you, they're like, oh, I'm going to see you. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to see Susie McCabe. And that's because I know what to expect from this. So it's fine. Whereas they're sitting there going, oh, she's a woman, he's a guy, she's telling stories, he does puns, but I bought tickets. So it's that, yeah.
How do you structure what you're doing? Because when you do it, you suckle it all back and all that. Do you sit and write it out, or is it all in your head? And how would you structure a show for yourself? So
I would come up with an idea, right? So I had a show called Domestic Disaster. And that show was about, which you two both seen, actually. So that show was about my marriage breaking down, moving back home with my parents, going into the world of dating, and realising that I was just terrible at life. Basically, modern life. I'm like, I just want to go back to 1997. I just want a bottle of poppers and a pair of samba. So going back to that. And then I would sit and go, right, so what am I going to talk about? So you would obviously start with the breakdown of the marriage, moving back home, what happens in that dynamic with the home. So I would sit with a mind map and mind map it out. So I would take a bit and then I would go away and develop that bit. Then I would sit and write and go, right, what do I want to talk about here? What's happened? Right, I'll take it. And then kind of write it out long form and then do the next bit, and then go back and be like, all right, take that out, put that joke in there, do this, do that. Because it kind of seeps through your brain. Like, you'll take a break from it and you like, obviously just now I'm building up to something where I'm just putting so much legwork into the show that I'm sitting and I'm taking stuff out and putting stuff back in, and then you're basically tightening nuts and bolts constantly, and things change. The world changes. You know what I mean? So you go, can't really talk about that because they're dead, or I can't really talk about that because, you know, turns out, you know, they're not a good person and stuff. You know what I mean? So you need to, your show constantly evolves, and you're constantly evolving in your head. You're like, oh, I've thought of another line. And like voice memos are a godsend because you're just like, blah, 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 blah. Right? Do you know what I mean? Just constant, because something will happen. You'll see something and you go, oh, I could put that into that wee bit. And listen, it'll be like a 6 or 7 second line, but it could get you a massive laugh.
Do you ever bounce ideas off your partner? Is that like, you say, I've got this joke, is she ever brave enough to just go, that was shite?
Oh,
that was brilliant. Oh, no.
Oh, aye, all the time, because she actually loves comedy, and she's got a really great comedy brain, and she will go and see anything and everything. So her comedy's a broad church. Things will make her absolutely howl that won't make the majority of people laugh, but she gets it. And I'll sit with her and I'll be like, what do you think of that? And she's like, probably needs tightened up a wee bit. It's probably just a bit too fat, right? And I'll go, right. And I'll go away and I'll tighten up. And she'll go, yeah, or move that word to there. And I'll go, move that word to there. And then I'll come in and go, that worked to treat. She'll be like, aye, that. Because you need that, and you can't always do it with other comedians, because what happens is, by sheer osmosis, you take on each other's voice.
Yeah, that's why we don't listen to other Celtic podcasts.
Yeah, and you're quite right. I've listened to them all. That's it. You should sign up to the Patreon.
Oh.
Definitely.
100%. Patreon.com/20minute Tim.
See, that's the osmosis, me saying it on the podcast every couple of weeks.
That's like every night, just seeping into my brain. Every couple of weeks, every couple of minutes.
Right.
And tell me, Stephen, how do they get access to that? So yeah, but don't get me wrong, there are comedians who I will then go and say, going to go and have a look at this and see what you think, because they know your voice. And they'll read through it and they'll go, I think that bit and that bit and that bit's really strong. You need to go and work in that bit, which you'll know within yourself, but they can sit and they can read what you've written because they know your voice and you know theirs. So in their own time, they can sit and have a look through it with a cup of tea and go, you know, that works, mate. I see where you're going with that. Do you know what I mean? So, aye, everybody pulls it like some people have writers and directors. I'm like, you have a director to tell you when to be funny.
What part do you fit in? If somebody's writing it and somebody's directing it?
You're just saying it.
Aye.
So basically, you're acting. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I remember saying to my agent, I mean, I know some people get directors, and he literally just went, nope. He went, are you going to pay someone money to tell you what to do while you simultaneously tell them to fuck off? And I was like, that's a fair point, mate. That's a fair point. It's like, you don't need somebody to tell you that you're funny. Just do your stuff, you know?
See, what osmosis? You're sitting in Stephen's chair,
I
so
know.
you might get
I'm going to be coming up with all the puns. All the terrible puns.
That's what we were going to ask, one if that comedy course is still going, so we could send Stephen on.
You should send Stephen. Do you know what? I'll give you the name of 2 comedians to do it. Do you know he's funny and
He's not here to defend himself. That's why
so
we're
let's
doing
just
it.
get wired right in about him. No, he is funny though. And he's good and he's quick with the puns, man. He is good, but he would do my nothing. I'd be like, just take the night off, Stephen. We're just sitting having a pint, mate. We're at a funeral. Just take the night off, man. Oh, I've got another one. No, mate.
How did comedy survive during lockdown?
So some people sat on social media and moaned about how terrible it was.
Did you record an Imagine video? Did you?
I was writing about that. So there's a guy called Dario Bernardi who owns Room 2 and Maxie's in McCabe.
Oh, I know Maxie's.
Right, so McCabe's lovely, actually, if you like your Japanese foods, right? It's really, really nice. It looks like a wee Japanese street market.
Right.
It's really cool. And I did a wee gig in a comedy cellar in Lachita in the basement of Maxie's, and it was cracking. And it was like a little 50-seater, like New York basement.
Right.
Right? It was great. And it was once a month, Wednesday night. Then COVID hit. And Dario, in room 2, built a studio. He built a 180-degree wraparound stream.
Oh, I think I remember you mentioning that.
Full green screen, floor and everything. And we got comedians in because we could do that because it was a recording, and we were all masked up and everything like that, and then went on the stage and they done a show on Zoom into people's living rooms, and you could YouTube it, so you didn't, you're just watching the show, or you could be in Zoom where we could all talk to you, and it was amazing, and it worked a treat. So the stand live, we done that. People signed up, and do you know what? It was great. It was absolutely great. But it's to be back to see the whites of people's eyes.
The real gigging.
Yes, what you want, and nobody. You don't want to go and see a band on Zoom, do you? No. It's different if they're playing somewhere in New York, and you're like, I can hook in and watch that. Amazing.
But we all start watching bloody last season on the Path to Paradise. Jesus, man.
Honestly, it was so bad when it even you're sitting watching even like Man U Liverpool and stuff, and you're like, just put something else on. Because it just felt wrong, didn't it? It just and we were obviously all having a meltdown and just going,
can you believe this?
What are we watching? Never has a season been so prevalent of how important the Celtic support are and how not important other fans are.
Yeah.
Hey, do you know, because you're going, I mean, I know there was obviously a few issues, but you're going, like, never has a fan base literally sucked a ball into a goal. And I was actually saying this with the Rangers Motherwell game, when Motherwell came back and won 2 each, and I was like, I'm not saying it couldn't happen at Celtic Park. I'm just saying the chances of it being allowed to happen are very different, because there's a mindset, there's a switch there, isn't there, of no, whatever you do, no, as opposed to, I can't believe you've done this to me.
Waiting for it to happen.
Do you know, so that was hard. Like, watching football like that was heartbreaking.
It wasn't football, was it?
No, it wasn't football. And do you know, it's not even just that, it's the whole social aspect of that. Like, you think about, like, I used to have a season ticket for years, and you think about the wee old guy that comes along every week, has sat in that seat since the stadium opened. That's part of his weekly routine, whether it be with his son, his grandson, his missus, whatever. That's getting out, and people were locked in their house, and I don't mean all right people. I mean shielding group people.
Aye. You've mentioned a couple of things there that piqued my interest. Celtic in the 90s for a start,
man,
and you mentioned that you're a lesbian, so that must have been a tricky situation in the 90s.
So I've actually got
Catholic family.
I've got a joke about this in the show, right? I'll just state it now. I've got a joke about this in the show, but I'm like, nowadays it's illegal to attack or be violent or leather somebody because of their sexuality. Back when I came out, it was the pole staying the leather. Right? It's like I used to, and I was a Celtic fan, so that's like a fucking twofer. So I could leave Celtic Park on a Wednesday night, walk down to Dell's, 2 dunes, going for a night out with a Kevlar vest and a crash helmet. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just like, it's the gay thing now, right? When you go back, that's all right. Just take it just across the back, mate. Anywhere but the face. That was easy. You know, my mum and dad didn't really accept it at all. I left the house. I lived with my nana for 2 years, who had more statues in the Vatican and was totally fine with it. She's like, it's fine, no bother.
All those wee porcelain ones?
He'd have.
Aye, what? Just like my granny.
Everywhere, everybody that's ever been to Lourdes, 300 sets of rosary
Did
beads.
she ever bring you back one of the wee plastic Hail Marys, one of the plastic Marys with the water in it?
Aye, with the wee.
I remember we were at school, and then one of the teachers came to Lourdes, but sorry to interrupt, but he just dislodged another memory, and we all dared each other to drink it. Fucking drink it, drink that holy water. We'll see what happens.
That's why you're good looking.
Thanks very much.
Nothing happens. I actually used to have a joke about that as well, about living with my girlfriend, and she was like, I don't think you put iron in water and iron. I was like, I was brought up a Catholic. The amount of shit I've been told about special water, right? And now you're telling me there's special water for an iron.
Is there?
Iron in water. Apparently it helps. But yeah. So that was pretty grim. And I came out in 97. So New Labour had came in, and then that's when things very slowly started to change. We had the campaign to get rid of Section 28, Clause 28 in Scotland in 1998, which was a really horrible vitriolic campaign. And this is why, as a woman who was born in the 80s, I will never understand a gay Tory of my generation, because they brought in a law to stop kids asking teachers, I might be gay, what do I do? That's what that was, you know. And that was brought in by Thatcher's government. And that's how I like there's times I just look at Ruth Davidson and I'm like,
oh, she was immediately came to mind there when you mentioned
yeah,
that.
I just look at her and I'm like, so we're round about the same age. It's probably about a year or two between us. We lived in the same country and we grew up at the same time. How, in your head, does that rationalise your life? Because in 2002, David Cameron was still against gay marriage. He came out, there's footage of that. She's married, she has a child. There are people in this world who wouldn't let gay people have children.
Cognitive dissonance must be enormous. Enormous.
Madness.
Aye.
So so it was really difficult and it wasn't easy. And then you start to see it getting easier and getting better. I also actually talk about that in the show as well. But the what you lived through and what existed for decades, because what you always need to remember is people tread a path for you. Like, I always say that I couldn't do the type of comedy I do if it wasn't for Jerry.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's no many working class Scottish women for the East End of Glasgow telling jokes. Add into that the lesbian. You look at the lesbians on the telly. Calman, Perkins, Toxvig. What bit of this looks... I never even went to university. Do you know what I mean? So it's that, and I feel like that about the whole sexuality thing, that you have to kind of tread the path for those coming behind you. And then now I'm sitting arguing with, this is where I will argue with all the lesbians on Twitter going, yeah, if you're male to female trans, you're not a woman. Are you not? Are you not? Are you not? So you're going to deny somebody the same equality that you've got because you're going to now be selective in your equality?
That's the thing that always does my nut in, like the sort of pulling up with the bridge. I've passed through this Rubicon, I bet nobody else can. I know what I'm saying to you is the same thing or similar arguments people said to me, but it's like me listening to music. Like, I decided about 15 years ago, I've heard enough. I've heard enough music. I've heard enough of these people, and I've heard enough of these arguments. I lived through this 20 years ago, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, and it's this kind of thing that you sit and you say to yourself, you know, it's like pulling the bridge up. It's like they've pulled the bridge up, doused it in petrol, set it on fire.
Right.
You know, they're like, you're just not getting up, not a chance. And I just kind of look at it and I go, I come from a world where I know the stories, and you know, that old guy that's standing across there that you're smirking at, well, he's been to more funerals than what you'll ever need to go to because of when his generation came out. And that was through no fault of his own. And I remember doing a thing for Pride, right? I went backstage and there was 2 drag queens. They're all that. And they were like that. Like, nah, don't even. And they were like, And I was like, what's your name? It was whatever. And I went, no, what's your actual real name? Like, Peter. I went, Peter. Where are you from? He's like, Elderslie. And I went, right, Peter. I said, see all this, see all that, sashay away, all that cultural appropriation that you're doing. Because that was drag, and that was trans, and that was black who done that at the Stonewall pub, right? That wasn't wee white straight guys for Elderslie. This was black men and people who were trans in the 60s that stood up and took a heel to a copper so that you've got that freedom, that I've got that freedom. See all this freedom. I remember coming down here and getting a 2.5 polis, right? So here's the thing, Peter. Do your eyebrows, do your makeup, and play nice. And he was like, I'm pure sorry, hen, right? And I was like, do you know, because I'm not having it. You know what I mean? And we're all part of one community. The world's so divided and so messed up. That community must stick together.
Yeah.
You know, that it must stick together. And going back to Celtic, it was the Celtic community that brought about all the change.
Yeah.
It was the Celtic community at Celts for Change in St Mary's Hall that went down, that got people to go out and sell their shares and get Ferguson and build a stadium. That was, I remember going up to Celtic Park and people stopping you. Don't go in, don't give them the money. It's the only way we're going to get change. Stop giving them money and we'll get change. And when a community works as one, that's when change will come.
See, when you were talking about community there, you coming out when in the late 90s, how did you sort of find your community? Because nowadays you've got social media where you feel, oh, there's other people around like me, but back in that time there wasn't like that. You obviously had Celtic where you felt comfortable, but how else did you get comfortable in that?
So I worked in a shop called Bankrupt Clothing, which used to be in Gordon Street and then moved round to Queen Street, and 3 gay guys worked in it. And they were like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Nah, I'm not gonna let it. You're 100%. And that was it. Showed me Dells and the polo and all that. And when you at that time, but listen to a wee bit where there was a greater sense of community to what there is now, because there had to be.
Yeah.
There had to be, because there was a chance that you were going to get your face booted, or there was a chance that there was a straight couple in the bar, you know what I mean, and all that kind of stuff. So we protected each other, and you find that out, and you make friends, and people talk to you, and you get their stories, and all the stories at that time were, I mean, a lot of them were just really, really tragic, like really tragic, and it was an absolute. Just happens to be when you were born, what your generation is, like there was guys that were married that had left their wives, and their wife and kids didn't talk to them because the guy was like, "Can't do this any longer." Like, you imagine living that lie and that life. I came out at 17, but I knew for years, and it's a weight, and it still is a weight, and that's why it's still really important. And it's quite funny because kids now go, "Yeah, I don't consider like not being homophobic woke," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that's you." There's still people getting thrown off buildings in Chechnya for it. So that, like, we're still killing people in the UAE, and we're still selling them missiles. So
this needs to permeate, doesn't it? It always needs to just keep going and keep going and keep going. It's that thing where you can never really say, "Oh, it's sorted now."
It's like racism, isn't it? In the southern states of America, you go. Every 5, 6, 7 years, it's going to rear its ugly head because it's always going to exist.
And the people that are opposed to it, they still exist. It's just that you've managed to keep their voices down and sort of take over the discourse a wee bit. But you always get the feeling with these things, like, as soon as you stop talking about it, if everyone was to stop talking about it and stop paying attention to it, these people wouldn't. They would be back.
100%. And there's also like that element of, until you start to get rid of things like the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
Right? Until you get rid of that, you can't move on. And that's when you seen, like, I think it was Lady Antebellum and the Dixie Chicks all changed their name because their names were synonymous with really poor examples of things in the southern states of America.
Even here, like Brexit, you think like, I grew up the whole time thinking, like, the country's moving forward, we're going in a certain direction. And then this Brexit thing comes along, and then next thing you know, Jacob Rees-Mogg talking about taking us back to pounds and shilling and imperial measurements. You're like, hold on,
sticking you up a chimney.
Aye, who's wanting this?
So here, I mean, although if you go through history, so in the 50s we had the obviously the Mosley fascists. In the 80s we had racism and fascists, like the riots and stuff like that. And then we kind of go a bit liberal again. But this country is a naturally conservative country. It's very much empire and power and jackboots and all that kind of stuff. I don't really understand the need to feel like you're top dog.
See, when you say this country, do you mean the UK? Because I feel Scotland's different to that.
Yeah, I think when you're Scottish, you're a small northern European land, and we're quite a big wee country in Northern Europe, right? And we're quite important. People forget how important we are. Like, you just need to look at the world just now and think, if we go 6 hours east, we're going to hit Moscow, and if I go 5 hours west, I'm going to hit the eastern seaboard of the United States, right? So, or North America, we are quite important. And I think it's that. And people will say, "Oh, the union is a partnership of equals," and you go, "Great," and then they go, "Well, it can't be because we're bigger." How does that work?
Aye.
Do you know what I mean? It's like saying, "Well, your big brother needs to get the top bunk." Aye, but he keeps pissing the bed, but he's your big brother. Do you know what I mean? And I think as well, historically, and you kind of try and say this to folk, 1606, Union of the Crown, 1707, the political union of Scotland and England, 1801, Ireland joins the Union, 1922, the start of the Irish Free State, subsequently 1948, the Republic. Maybe, just maybe, every 100 or so years, the relationships within the Union change organically because the world changes. And I said this on a political show, and I went, 3 things that kept the Union together were Protestantism, empire, and war. So the war will be a very different war, which we're not going to be a major player on. Empire is done, and we joined empire for trade routes, which we've just taken ourselves out of. Yeah. And then Protestantism is no more relevant as Islam or Catholicism or whatever it may be in this multicultural world. And I done that, and after I'd done the show, I get pulled aside, and I was told you shouldn't say Protestantism.
Oh.
And I was like, well, it's only relevant for people like you that are wearing Union Jack socks, because that's what you're wearing. So we'll leave that there, right? And I think that's it. And I think Scotland looks outwardly, and people go, "Oh, nationalism's nationalism." It's not. It can't be.
No, it's not.
Are
it's
you
not
telling
the same
me
thing.
that Ukraine's nationalism is the same as Russia's?
Yeah. It's not, and that's an argument that just doesn't hold any water with me when you hear politicians say, "Oh, the Scottish nationalism is a scourge and all that." You go, well, hold on a wee minute. It's not quite the same.
Yeah, because you can outwardly look and embrace, which Scotland has always had to do because it's a small country, and small countries need to have immigration.
So do your politics and your comedy, do they have a mix?
No, really, like on stage, like it's quite hard not to sometimes, like you have a wee bit about Boris or something, do you know what I mean? Because he's a gift.
Yeah.
Like he is a gift, and people are like, aye, that's pretty much it, aye. I never really go down the route of kind of, like I'm very much pro-independence, and you kind of, and people then just assume that you're pro-SNP.
Yeah.
And you're like, you can be pro-independence but not vote. Like people
Precisely.
can choose.
Independence isn't SNP forever.
No.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's us get independence, so we'll not be having any more elections because we're now Saudi Arabia. It's the House of Sturgeon.
It's sorted.
Do you know what I mean? And you're like, it is what it is. But I actually this discussion the other week with my girlfriend where I said, do you know what's really sad? Because I've seen, so in the past couple of days, I've seen that Labour are getting rid of the red rose to bring out
I saw that, yeah.
Purple, right? Total, like, virtue signalling, right? And then Keir Starmer wouldn't back full access to Ukrainian refugees.
Yeah.
And I'm like, mate, you're the leader of the Labour Party. And I actually said to Nicola, I said, this is what it comes down to for me. I said, I didn't leave Labour. Labour left me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people
feel like that, yeah.
You know, I says, and I'm not saying that it'll be the SNP forever or the Green Party forever or whoever it may be, but I know that I'll always be centre. I'll be centre left because that's who I am. And right now, I can't do that. But when you try and explain that on a stage, or if you're trying to do something, you need to pick and choose your audience. You know what I mean? And most people will be like, actually. Like when I done the debate night stuff, a lot of people messaged me and went, you really spoke a lot of sense.
Do you like doing that sort of stuff?
I enjoy it. Like, it's not making people laugh. Like, I love making people laugh, you know what I mean? But I do, because sometimes I go, people like me need to hear somebody like them.
Yeah, totally.
Do you know what I mean? To go, actually, like, they were all arguing about, on the debate night thing, Anna Sarwar was like, well, I mean, we need a windfall tax, and even Thatcher gave a windfall tax. And when it came to me, and I was like, just to remind you that Thatcher sold off the national energy, and that's why we needed a windfall tax. Because she sold it for a song, right? So don't make out that she was some good Samaritan. And I remember just like saying to the three of them, you can change this. You have been elected as public officials. It doesn't matter that you sit in one parliament or you sit in another, right? You all know the same people and you all talk to the same people. So do you know what? Go and fix it. Yeah. I can't fix it. You go and fix it because you've got the power and the ability to do it. And it's that kind of, I'm going to actually I'm going to go in on all three of you, regardless of my political affiliations, because you can make life better for people. I can only do that for half an hour, 20 minutes, an hour and a half, whatever it may be. This is your job.
That should be the reason they get into it, but they get lost along the way a lot of the time, and then
the greed and the laziness. I've got a mate who's an MP, and she get into politics for LGBT rights and student funding, like student loans and all that. And she's an MP, and I know the story of her life, and I can genuinely say, hand in heart, she does it to make people's lives better. And she's gay, and she's had constituents going, I don't agree with your stance on abortion. She's like, I totally appreciate that, but here's where I'm coming from. And they've went, okay, you know, or like brought in things like domestic violence bills and all that, like stuff that will be good for people. That's the job.
Just when you're saying about making people feel better, you reminded me of somebody else there. You reminded me of Ange. That was his comments after that recent Glasgow derby, wasn't it? He says, people come in with problems, I hope I made them feel better for an hour and a half.
It's true. And it, like, if you've got the ability to do that, like you've got the ability to just make somebody think, like, I remember doing a gig at the Stand one night and I had a whole bit about my nana dying, right? And the absolute pain and tragedy of it. But the whole bit was like my mum saying, that's the priest in the way, that's the priest staying for a cup of tea. And then all the ins and outs of that, her saying to me, you know, get in the shop, get them biscuits. And I'm like, get off my nut, get the Hoover out with it, my nana, get a leg and a wing, right? The whole, like, you know, that Catholic mentality just kicks in it. It's like, that's somebody did, automatic pilot. And I'd done this whole bit, and it's like 10, 15 minutes. I came off stage and I was going out, and the guy was kind of hanging about, and he was waiting for his wife, and he's like, can I say, has anybody? I buried my dad 2 weeks ago. I didn't want to come here the night. He's like, but this is the first time I've laughed in a month. He went, because I've just lived through all of that. And he goes, you're absolutely spot on. Like, the priest stealing all the biscuits and I'm just trying to sneak out for a fag, but my mum doesn't know I smoke. Do you know what I mean? Like, and he's like, I've just lived through all of that. He's like, honestly, he was like, and you go, well, do you know what, man? If he's sitting tomorrow and he's a wee think about his dad, and then maybe a wee joke comes in, it might just perk him up a wee bit. Do you know what I mean? And then you kind of go, well, that's all right, you know?
That's so good. That's good. See, when you first started out, you must have had some ambitions, because I know you're playing the Kings in a couple of weeks. Did you ever think, right, yeah, Kings Theatre, that's me. I want to play the Kings. I want to do London. Or did you just think, right, I'm just going to keep riding and see where I go with this?
So kind of a bit of both. Like, in my head, you're like, do you know if you could play the Kings one? Right, because the Kings is the king, like, it's beautiful. Do you know, it's beautiful. But I've never went, I want to sell out arenas. I've never actually really wanted that. I would be really happy selling out 1,000 to 3,000 seaters up and down the UK. Beautiful theatres, UK and Ireland, like, you know, His Majesty's in Aberdeen, the Edinburgh Playhouse, like real beautiful old school theatres. I've never wanted that whole, I'm going to the Hydro, bigger and better. I appreciate, like, the likes of Kevin, that door was opened, not like, it just went mental. And he can't do anything else. He's got no choice. He'd be at the Kings for like 6 months, man, every night, like, right? He's got no choice, because he's that famous and he's that popular, and that's amazing that we've got to that level with one of us. But equally, it's hard going for him, you know. So you go, I'd love to play the Kings one day. Like, do you know what? You actually go, I'd love to do a weekend at the Stand. Right? I'd love to do 10 minutes on a weekend at the Glasgow Stand, because that's like a proper club.
You're sitting home now?
Aye. I think the staff feel that, and all the laugh. Here she is again, man. And then you're like, what you want to close the gig. And I was really fortunate, because as much as what I didn't do the Stand for the first 2 years, I was promoted from middle 10 to headliner within 3 years. And that's like unheard of. When I was a woman, so they're always like really promoting women to go through. And I was just doing the job. I was just making sure every time I went into that Stand, I smashed it. Every time. Didn't matter what one, I just went out, smash, smash, smash. And kind of force the club to promote you. You need, it's the only way. It's like being a football player, innit? You just need to keep going out and like smashing in performances to go, we can't drop him. He's got to stay. Do you know what I mean? And like that first weekend headlining the Stand, I was like, that's amazing. Do you know what I mean? And then like I done my first ever solo show. So my first ever solo show was the 28th of March 2013, and it was in the Wee Dram. And if my gig had went ahead when it was meant to go
Oh,
ahead,
the same day.
it would have been the 28th of March 2020 within 7 years. So 2 shows at the Wee Dram one night to 1 night at the King's. So 60 people to 1,700. That's like, so it's now obviously with COVID 9 years. But I'm really, really proud of that because that's like been graphed. That's been doing solo shows every year, building it up. Went to the Fringe once or twice. Then I went away and I toured and made sure I had really good kind of tour dates. Just small, some 150 seaters, some 400-500 seaters, done well with the sales, and then went back to the Fringe, signed with the agent that I wanted to sign with, which was Off the Curb. So that's like McIntyre, Alan Carr, Kevin, Andy Parsons, Kerry Godliman, Susie Ruffle, Tom Allen. Do you know what I mean? Like guys and girls that you put on your telly and you see Rosie Jones, right? Josh Widdicombe, all these guys. And that's the agent that I wanted to be with, because if you're going to be with an agent, be with that agent. And getting the Kings, it was just like...
I love the King's Theatre. Just as soon as you go into the King's Theatre for anything, you're excited the minute you walk in. It's brilliant.
It's beautiful. It feels like home.
Aye.
Doesn't it? It feels like home, and it's like it's everything that you've ever been to see. Do you know what I mean? Like the Theatre Royal's gorgeous, but it's not for comedy.
No.
Right? And the King's, like on the stage at the King's, is actually quite narrow, right? But it's a high room, but it's really close. So see, as much as when it's a big old theatre, there's not really that much distance. Like you could probably kick a ball.
This is a silly question to ask a comedian, but I'm not a professional, right? But do you ever get like stage fright? Like when you're walking out in these, but do you ever just...
Oh, aye!
Do you? I was just wondering if you
for
just
that.
take it in your stride.
No, you can't take that in your... No, even the other night, I was at the Edinburgh and the Glasgow stand, and I was running out new material, and I was like pacing up and down, and I was like, oh, remember that bit, you need to put this bit in. Because it's new. It's new stuff, and you're trying to get it out. No, you need the nerves.
Do you?
See, I think when you stop having the nerves, you should stop doing it.
Because I couldn't imagine just that curtain goes back. You're on the... I'm not trying to make you feel worse. I'm just thinking putting myself in your shoes. It's like going that nightmare you have when you go to school when you close on. Like that curtain opens, you just go...
Call your teacher
man.
mum.
You're like, fuck, what am I doing here, man?
So people don't realise, like, when you're doing a show like that, or even like on tour, I've always done this. I've always set a pre-gig playlist.
Right.
So I done a show called The Drugs Don't Work, and it was about my mental health, dealing with depression, and how we deal with it in this country. And it was a good laugh of a show, but it was bonkers. So all the music was like 90s indie music, right? And it was about me when I first started to take drugs and all that. And then the show for the Kings is Born Believer. So I've had to sit and go through and come up with a playlist. So when the people are in the theatre that night, that's what they're going to hear. And then I've got my walk-on song. So I've sat and thought about that, and I've put that playlist together, and I've moved songs out, I've put songs in, and I've structured the playlist as well, because it'll never be booming out at the Kings, but it'll put you into a headspace before you come and sit in. And then it's like, I'll listen to it, and I can actually start, even just now, I can feel my stomach just like hitting the floor. I'm like, whoa! And like, I've already got my time to be around there to go and do my light and sound checks that afternoon. And my agent's like, right, so we'll do this for the kind of stage lighting, and then we're thinking for the walk-on, right, I'll talk to them, and I'll think, we'll do this, we'll do that. And I'm like, so everything that goes into it is for you to be sat there as an audience member and just be like, here we go.
How's the show changed? Because it was originally meant to be turning 40 2 years ago. Lockdown hits. Is there much changed in the show because it is 2 years on now?
Aye, there is, and probably my perspective because of the world that we live in. Like, I had a whole load of stuff where I was kind of like, and if you look at this, we need to fix this, we need to fix that. Whereas I'm kind of like now going, we need to be better. We don't need to fix this straight away. We need to be better. And I kind of give a wee bit more respect to the younger generations, where I'm like, do you know what? They stop giving them a hard time because they're up against it.
I think a lot of the time you sort of get to that age, and I feel like I'm getting a wee bit older, and you look to the younger people and you go, it's actually on news now. It's on news now. Like, it used to be us. We used to think that was us But we tried our best. It's up to you now a wee bit.
But then also I've got the younger generation going, I mean, we've fought so hard for equality. And I'm like, hold on. Right, so see if you look here, this was a brick. 1998. And so if you look here, you fought for everyone's fought for equality.
That's another reason I'm off social media, because I get sick of fetuses telling me, normalise the such and such. I'm like, right, what you're talking about there's a migraine. All right.
Aye.
Normalise this. No, I don't want to hear the word normalise anymore.
Aye. And it's this kind of, what we need to do is take everything and talk about how it's this and how it's that. No, we don't. We just need to accept things.
Yeah, deal with it.
Like I seen a quote for Jane Fonda the other day, and she was like, yeah, pronouns are a thing. You need to get your head round them, but it'll not be that difficult. And I was like, you are 80 years old and I love you.
Yeah.
Because you've just went, this is not difficult to do.
No, it's not. A lot of these things are not. A lot of people just try to hold on to the way things were in the past.
And if they had their way, we'd still be working in factories and chimneys.
100%.
You know, so we just accept that the world will always move on. I think that's how, like as I was saying the other day, we don't quite have a Kennedy and a Khrushchev. We don't even have a Merkel.
No.
But we might just have someone somewhere who will step up and go, enough.
That's just funny. Like every day, I think every day says it. Even my parents are just like, my dad, because he's of a certain age, he's like, where's the next John Kennedy? not John. Aye, John Kennedy. That's his name. I was thinking of Celtic.
You're like, oh no, another one. No. Yeah. I think it is that. It is that. And listen, they'll come through. The world has just went through a massive transition, but it always does. And you know,
there's too much going on now. I'm getting a wee bit sick of living through major events. Do you know what I mean? The financial crash, and then the Iraq war, then everything after that, and then the pandemic now, Russia. Just want to be break.
But then you go,
sound?
And just leave it.
But then you go, they went through the Roaring Twenties, then they had the Great Depression, and nothing rejigs an economy like a world war.
Oh, don't say that.
Guys, I'm not being funny, but the world's economy's gumped.
Well, we've been in this room for 2 hours, so things are moving quickly. We don't know what's happened by the time.
Listen, I done a gig at a highly sensitive area in Scotland yesterday. Let me just say I was blast zone level 0.
Oh, really?
Aye, and it was meant to be the Christmas gig and it had been postponed, and I was there. And security is tight. And I've been there before, but oh man, and they were like, yeah, this is probably the last day.
It's so funny because we were talking about TikTok. We're just going to wrap up. We were talking about TikTok earlier on, and there was a theme on TikTok where all these like American recruits, American soldiers were posting their meals, what they were getting in base camp, whatever they're getting in basic training, and they're like, I can't believe it. Like we're normally getting like mince and totties or whatever the America equivalent, but then it's like barbecue and lobster and crab legs. And they're like, I can't believe, why are we getting all this? And then all these vets were quoting the TikToks going, aye, that's called a morale meal. They give you that the week before you're sent to war. And I'm like, oh no, I can't cope with this.
You're about to get very busy, mate. Fill them with steak and omega-3, because that'll just get them pumped up. I'll be like Martin O'Neill's Celtic team when they won the treble. It just ran about in bowls of pasta at 11 o'clock in the morning. Happy days, man. Oh, jeez.
And I'm always interested to hear this. You're a comedian. Who are your favourite 3 comedians?
Oh, favourite 3?
Aye. I know I put you on the spot there.
It's really hard. Do you know what? Oh, man.
Even if you want to give me one, I'll concede.
So one will always be Connolly, right?
Aye.
Because that's like, I mean, it's like Jesus, isn't it?
I don't know. This country will need a day of mourning when the inevitable happens to Billy Connolly. I don't like thinking about it, but I mean, he's just an icon of all icons, man.
Aye. So Connolly, this city will go into a meltdown.
Why?
Man, like I love Kevin's stuff.
He's your pal.
And it's also like his last show was actually a show that provoked your thought as well. Like he said stuff then that people weren't quite maybe banking on hearing, but he made it really funny. Do you know what I mean? And now I know kind of what's coming down the line. I know wee bits and bobs it, and I'm like, wow, that's exceptional. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to say Janie, because for the reason that I spoke about earlier, if she didn't do what she done, I couldn't do what I did.
Well, that's why I brought her up, because I think a lot of people that are listening to this will only know of her the sort of the Twitter stuff, but and we didn't discuss it before, but I've just heard other Scottish comedians talk, and her name's one that comes up quite a lot. So I thought it'd be good for people to get like an insight into the sort of comedian's impression of Janie Gordon.
It's tremendous. No room that she can't do, and she just knows what funny is, and she does. She just knows, because you'd be amazed at how many do not. They are long gigs. You're sat there as the MC going, "Oh no, this is all."
Oh, that must be that. And the comedians joke about dying on stage, but I've never experienced it, but I have, and this isn't even remotely close, but I have been to a couple of weddings where the best man speech never got a single laugh, and I just thought, being a comedian doing that, like, it must be 10 times worse.
I remember one night at the Stand, I was backstage maybe a Saturday night, and whoever was on died. Every other comedian in the room went out to watch it because they all love a good death, right? And I was just sat going, I can't, because I think that's my fear of, see that dream you're talking about, going to school with your clothes on. I'm like, no, I can't, because it could happen to any of us at any given point. It was such a hard death, and you were like, oh, just stop. Like, the tech is in position, just say, look, folks, it's not happening for me tonight. And walk off. But I tell you what's worse than that. Like, you've seen comedians die and we've all been like, you're right, mate. And you kind of just go. And if you die, you go backstage, you pick up your stuff, and you go, see some more against, right? And you just leave. You don't bring down the green room. You don't
spread your bad vibes. Just take your thing home. Exactly.
Up the road, go for a shower, and forget it. And now what you will get is you'll get the 10-minute spot coming backstage and going, I'll be honest with you, they're not really my audience.
Oh, no.
And you're like, the audience is not the problem here.
You're not funny.
You're very much the problem here. Or maybe the fact that you're drunk. Or maybe the fact that you're stoned. Maybe you just go up the road and come in straight tomorrow and see what happens. But yeah, that's the worst. But if you die like backstage, it's worse if you're away from home and there's maybe 3 of you in the one hotel and you're like, oh man.
What happened? Is one up like you've got something you do like 4 nights, and then one night, bang, hilarious. Night 2, hilarious. Night 3, did you like, wait, that worked 2 nights? That worked for 2 nights? What the fuck happened there?
No, it might be a night where we all go, this is murder the night. Like, we just can't get anything out of them, and everybody's tried their best, and you just go, don't know what happened there, right? We just need to go up the road. But see, if it's one of you, you're just like,
so it's 4 in the middle, and they're pissing themselves at 3 guys, and one guy does. Oh, that must be so
like,
bad.
You're like, and see if it's me, I've like keys my jacket, right? I'll see you tomorrow night, up the road, have a beer, go in, forget about it, get over it, go back the next night, be better. But some guys like to sit and go, yeah, I don't think that was really my fault. And you're like, no, mate, it was your fault talking about your grand's boobs, man. Like, nobody needs that. Do you know what I mean? So, it's grim.
Jamie.
Yes.
See, if people enjoyed this and wanted to go and see Susie, where could they go and see her?
And come see me at the King's Theatre on the 26th of March. There's about 50, 60 tickets left for that.
No, after this goes out, there'll be.
I know, that'll be gone. Celtic family comes together.
Aye,
that's
exactly.
what we do, man. Innit? The Black need to support her own, and she's a lesbian. Honestly, her weight of Catholic guilt must be killing her, man.
If you buy a ticket for Susie after watching this, we'll send you a 20-minute Tim's badge. There you
yes,
go.
yes, shows your ticket.
Don't need our help to sell it, but you want it sold out.
I would love that to be sold out. I'd love it. So no, please buy some tickets and come and see us at the King's. Other than that, it'll be Edinburgh Fringe for 3.5 weeks.
Aye.
Bring cuddles, coffee, and your Glasgow accents, because I'll need to hear them.
And on that, I just want to say thank you so much, Susie,
Thanks
for
very much,
joining
guys.
us. People can find you on Twitter at Susie McCabe.
At Susie McCabe, yep.
On Twitter.
Facebook, soon to be TikTok because of Jamie.
There you go. I'm telling you, to get on TikTok, and we're not even on it yet.
So bad. Wait till I go home and tell the girlfriend that's me going in the TikTok. She'll like give me that phone.
You'll have to have her holding the phone while you do the dance and all that.
I totally get the weekend playing.
Yeah.
I saw that one. No, I can't.
I'll be looking out for your first TikTok.
Oh no!
Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in to watch us. Melly, any final comments or thoughts?
No.
I always like to put them in the spot when we end the podcast. Go, any final thoughts? They just go, no, nothing.
It's me dying in my arse there.
That's it, mate. That's it, mate.
Thank you so much for watching and listening.